what are we going to do now? This is an opportunity to get more creative perhaps and shift some. And Nathan's just a really, really good editor.
He makes magic out of, puts a lot of things together.
Right. Because I think in a way we were kind of following into a pattern. For a while there, we kind of had an intro and the thing and
much more scripted.
And in a way that's cool because you know what to expect, and this is when he's going to say that.
When life throws a challenge at you, one thing is certain: to find a resolution for every issue, every problem, for everybody, there's more than one way.
So just a couple times ago, we started just doing what we're doing right now, just starting to chat. Yeah. Now, and so that's kind of what we're doing right now, whether you know that or not. That's what we're doing.
We're along for the ride. So we're having a transition within the transition.
Yeah, that's right.
There you
that's
go.
Right. That's right.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the More Than One Way podcast. I'm Whitney Ross, and I'm excited to welcome you into our latest conversation. This episode is all about transitions, both on the micro and macro level. Just felt like that just in the season that we're in, this is a great conversation. We brought in a special guest with us to join this conversation who has great insight and experience around transitions. And so we're excited to have Caroline Vogel with us. Caroline's a spiritual director, a certified life coach. She works with mindfulness and meditation. She's a writer and an author, and just has a wealth of wisdom and a real joy of life and spirit that I think you'll really get to appreciate in this conversation. So thank you for joining us, and let's get started.
Yeah, but what's the energy within all that, right? From your perspective, what's the energy involved in transitioning in anything, but specifically in the things that you've transitioned in your life? Like, what's it feel like to you, or how would you articulate it?
I think it really depends on the transition.
Yeah.
And I've been going through multiple transitions recently, and my life tends to go like that. I can't just do one at a time. I need to do multiple transitions at a time. And for me, the energy, if I'm honest, it feels really chaotic.
Oh, yeah.
And because it's like all the old norms fly out the window, and you go, okay, what now?
Yeah.
And for me, I felt so grateful as I've moved through this last grouping of transitions to have my mindfulness and meditation practice that I've relied on every single day, because all the transitions I've been going through have been needed, some more than others. And so I kept kind of hearing the whispers of the Holy Spirit kind of inviting me to, like, how calm can you stay and maneuver these transitions, right? Like, can you ride the waves of life with a sense of ease and peace and calm? Or can you just do that when, like, everything's smooth?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it almost has been like a challenge of, like, where am I a black belt yet with mindfulness, or am I more early stages? And so my best days in transition, I would say, are the ones where I just really own, like, I needed these transitions, and they're full of the Spirit. And even though they don't always feel good, and not many people necessarily understand them, I do. And I can honor them and respect them, and then try to be as calm and have as much ease as I can.
Yeah. Well, is there any one in particular that comes to mind? Is there any particular transition where this, the process that you were just talking about took place?
So in the end of November, I resigned from my job at a church, and I have been pivoting in to do the counseling world, which, I mean, I got my master's in counseling 22 years ago, and I'm like, am I old enough to have a master's degree 22 years ago? Turns out I am. And so it's been both a process of leaving something, right? Leaving church work, in addition to pivoting into something new.
Right.
So it hasn't just felt like one thing.
Yeah.
It has felt very much like both. The leaving of something and the moving towards something new.
Yeah, I wonder if that's why we're calling it transition, but you could just as soon call it change, right?
Change. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So why people have such a hard time with change, that might be one of the reasons why. You know what I mean? You know, that there's that leaving behind part, or the normal, as you called it, that is so familiar.
Yes.
Yeah.
Even if there's all these hints that are saying, that's not working too well for you, it's still known.
Yeah.
Yes.
You're
Right?
still connected to it.
Yeah, you're still connected to it.
Yes.
There's still some sense of, hey, at least this is predictable.
Right. I know what I'm doing.
That's
or,
right.
Or I think I
Kinda,
do.
sorta, right, yeah.
Even that's
Yeah.
an illusion. But
Yeah. Even that's an
True.
illusion. But that's what I mean by the feeling, because it's like you get these little hints at times, like of possible transition / change. Get these little hints that are saying, maybe the way you used to do that isn't working the way you think it's working anymore.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And then that sometimes is the energy that helps. That's what I mean by the feeling. The energy that helps us move forward is just like,
Yes.
this just isn't going the way it used to go. This doesn't work the way it used to work.
Right.
You know? And either I have to change something about me to stay in it, or I have to get out of it and move into something else.
Yes, that's
Right.
it.
Does that feel right?
That does feel right. In fact, what comes to mind is late last summer, I was having a conversation. I was up in D.C. helping to officiate a wedding, and Gene Robinson was there. He was a retired bishop in the Episcopal Church. And I said to him, I don't know if parish ministry is where I belong. It's really not working for me. And even though I love the people that the parishioners of this parish are fabulous people, it's not about the people.
Yeah.
And he said, Caroline, wherever you're feeling called to has already been blessed. And I got so tearful at that.
Yeah, it's lovely.
And it felt soulful to me that, right. Like when you have a calling to ordained ministry, it's not only within the walls of the church. Like some of us are ordained and not meant to serve within the church. And there's actually a lot of Episcopal priests who don't serve within the church, who do things like I do, like are therapists and spiritual directors and and professors, these kinds of things. So, yeah, I mean, it's Jim Robinson is someone who's had to navigate a lot of change, not just for himself, but for large bodies of people within and outside the Episcopal Church. And so, anyway, I just think we oftentimes do get very afraid of change.
Yeah. Well, just for people who don't know, Gene Robinson is the first openly gay person who was ordained a bishop in the Episcopal Church. So that's who he is. And so if you can just imagine, if you want to just keep using this word, transitioning from somebody who didn't feel like that was something that could be made public,
right, into
making it very public.
Yes.
And then receiving all that comes from it, once again. And sometimes that's a fear to keep people from transitioning into their full life, I guess you could say.
Yes. Into
the full person that God's creating that person to be. And I think, what you're saying about the church, and I'll ask this for both of you guys, for Whitney and Caroline, how do you see that for people who aren't ordained? One of the things that we were talking about is how many side gigs people have in this kind of economy that we're a part of. Because, in the Episcopal Church, there's a particular calling, or for ordained ministry, there's a particular calling. But what about the calling for all people?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? How do you see that playing out? Some of the stuff that you were just saying, how do you see that playing out for somebody who isn't ordained?
So it's one of the reasons I love being a therapist, because I think it's playing out in all kinds of ways in every single person's life. I mean, if you're staying awake to your life, there's always going to be a calling on your life. That's my belief. And it may be what you get paid to do, or it may be something that you do on the side. It may be a passion. It could be a hobby. It could be just something that brings you utter joy. But I do think every human being has a call. And sometimes I think for me, I'm starting to wonder if it's not necessarily, I don't know if it actually has anything to do with ordained ministry as much as it has to do with an embodiment. Like I feel called to embody the fruits of the Spirit, like to be a vessel of love and joy and peace. I mean, it kind of sounds like the Buddha, but that feels like a calling to me. More than anything else. There's so much toxicity in this world and so much divisiveness, and I just want to be part of the goodness. And I want to help other people like be able to find an ability within them to harness that. So I do think about it actually a lot more globally than ordained or not, including for myself.
Yeah, me too. That's why I'm interested to hear your thoughts on it.
And I think you mentioned talking about people's kind of side gigs and that kind of thing. And I think another transition that we're definitely in is just in our identities within work, in our roles, with the idea that we're not just one thing, and it seems like that maybe we've taken a job and it's easy for that job to become your identity, especially if it's something you love and something you're great at and maybe you're even called to. But we're more than one thing. And so it's nice to be able to express that in different ways. Like you said, whether it's a hobby or just a side business on my own, or maybe at the heart, I consider myself an artist and I have different mediums that I use. So maybe I paint some, maybe I write poetry some, maybe I dance or do different things. But I really like that transition that's happening, because I think it's giving people the freedom to, like you say, a lot of times be more fully who they are as a whole and kind of create that themselves versus having to say, what do you want to be when you grow up? Choose one of these things and be that. I'm going to create myself.
Gotcha.
And it's going to have a little of this and it may have some of this, more like a chef in a kitchen, where I'm adding flavors and spices and different things to kind of create my own dish, if you will. But that takes courage to do that. It's vulnerable to do that. Maybe people don't like the same flavors I like, and so there's some risk involved in that. But I think at the same time, it's a hopeful risk. It's a risk with potential versus a risk of just fear by itself.
Yeah, and that makes me think of, it's like, how are we seeing ourselves? What in a sense, how do I what do I identify myself with? Who am I identifying myself as? Because part of the whole transitional thing for me is just that. How am I seeing myself? How am I seeing life? Which can then lead to how am I thinking about things? Which then can lead to then beliefs. What are my beliefs? And one of the big transitions for me, I think, in life is, how do we transition from one belief to another, or from one belief into just a willingness to kind of stay open to not sure what I believe yet.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. And one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about in connection to that, Thom, is in doing both therapy with people and spiritual direction, I find it in both camps, where to leave a particular belief, especially because rarely do you hold a belief by yourself. We're social creatures, right? And so, like, say we come from a family who holds certain beliefs, and then you start kind of challenging those beliefs. And it's like, whew, well, where do I even have a safe space to talk about this and explore what's going on in my mind and my heart and my soul? And I think that's a lot of times what ignites people to go into therapy or to go into spiritual direction. And this insight I've been having lately is just makes me feel really tender about, and it's kind of going back to what you said, Whitney, about the vulnerability of it, is it's very, very vulnerable to leave what you think you know, right? Yeah. And for some of us, there's even like a fight, flight, freeze that comes with it. It's not just this kind of luxury of, I'm going to believe this or I'm going to believe that.
Right.
In order to pivot to a new belief, for some of us, we go into fight, flight, freeze. Like there's something about, if I give up this other belief, something bad might happen. Like I might lose a relationship or so it becomes a really interesting, but oftentimes difficult thing to navigate.
Yeah.
It's much deeper than, oh, do I want this for breakfast or do I want this for breakfast? Right?
Right.
It's so much of our belief system is about our identity.
Yes.
And so to shift identity, that's a much bigger deal.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. That's why I think it's the transition of transitions in a sense while we're on this side of the pond, as it were. We can get so locked into our beliefs and so overly identified with them that we don't know who we are if we don't believe that.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
So I'm very, very compassionate with that, but at the same time, in order for life to move forward, especially our individual lives, but also all of life, in order for consciousness to move forward, in order for all of us to move into a deeper understanding, a deeper sense of who and what we are as human beings on this planet, that has to happen.
I know. Okay, so this is where I start getting really excited. Because this is where mindfulness and meditation practice can really help us.
Ah, yeah, right.
Okay.
So I teach a mindfulness-based stress reduction class that Jon Kabat-Zinn's been teaching for like over 30 years. And in it, we talk about the window of tolerance. We just went over this last Thursday night in class. So in the inner circle is a sense of safety, right? Like we're calm, we're at ease, nothing feels threatening, but we don't grow if we're in utter safety all the time.
Yeah.
So then the next ring is a sense of challenge, right? Like some stress actually is good for you because it compels us to think more broadly and to evolve. And that challenge is really used for healthy growth.
Yeah.
Okay, but then if we take that too far, and for some of us, like it used to be for myself, I'll own it, is a little bit of challenge could easily move me into overwhelm.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And so then in overwhelm, it's like, whoa, we're going into fight, flight, freeze.
Yeah.
So we have to learn the art of, and I think it is an art, but there's also some science to it too. We have all these beautiful ways, meditation and lots of spiritual practices that can take you from overwhelm back to a sense of safety so that then you can move back into challenge again. Because the goal, and some would say even the goal of life, is to broaden that inner circle.
Yeah.
Right?
To where you feel calm.
For where
in
you
a
feel
larger,
calm.
Yeah.
That's it. And so that challenge area actually can grow and grow and grow and get wider so that things that used to send you into overwhelm, they don't send you into overwhelm anymore. I mean, how hopeful is that?
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. And I would think, sometimes in my life it's been, so it doesn't send me into overwhelm as long.
Yep.
You're right. So it used to be, I was overwhelmed for a month.
Yes. Right.
Now I'm overwhelmed for 2 weeks.
Yeah, right. You're dialing it back.
And I'm dialing it. That's right. But the circle feels like it's getting bigger.
Yes.
It feels like it's okay. I can step into a situation. So it's like, for me, it would be like a massively crowded room where we're going to have a board meeting. And I think we call them board meetings for a reason.
Okay, I'm with you.
All right. So step into one of those places and anxiety's just flying. Yes. To the point of I'm criticizing people that in my own mind that I shouldn't be.
Yes.
They didn't deserve it. They don't deserve it. But that's part of dealing with the overwhelm.
Yeah, that is.
Right. And also
it's part of fight, flight, freeze. You're fighting just in your head.
Yeah, in my head. Yeah. So, paying attention to that, watching that in my meditation practice, sitting with that, letting it come in, getting used to that sense of that feeling. And some of it really is, for me, truth be told, is feeling, what's the word? Not good enough.
Yeah.
Feeling like these people in this boardroom, not only are they bored and boring, they're way smarter than me.
Yeah.
They're way smarter than me when it comes to this stuff. They know way more about this stuff than I do. They feel way more comfortable talking, and they're not boring. I was just kidding. But they know way more about this, and I feel extremely inferior in that, and that adds to the overwhelm and the feeling.
Right.
Yes.
And that sense of I'm not good enough. Well, how could I be in this room and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's how it's played out in one area of my life, and there's probably 50,000 more. But there's just that one that just says, okay, now I'll dial it back now. Instead of a month, it's 2 weeks. And my goal next time is for make it a week.
Right.
And then maybe after I leave the room, right?
Yeah.
That's right. And I think all of those fall into teeny transitions.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, they can feel big, but the transition, which for me is the ultimate transition, once again, is me transitioning. Is my attitude transitioning, is the way that I think about things transitioning, and the way that I'm experiencing things then transitions.
Right.
And I don't necessarily have to leave the place I'm in. Sometimes I do, but I don't necessarily have to.
I think that's a great point, because there are obviously people who are in a situation that they can't leave at times.
Yes, that's right.
And so I think what you brought up, the idea that sometimes the transition is an internal one or a perspective one, with the idea of how can I view this differently in a way that can allow me to survive where I am until that transition can happen. Is really important.
If it ends up being, yes, I cannot function and be fully me and whole and use the gifts that I have and continue to develop in this place, I have to move on. Kind of like what you were talking about, Caroline, and which is, I admire you so much for doing it. It is such an admirable thing. It's such a beautiful thing to see somebody stepping out more fully into their own life. I think it's lovely. But a lot of times it's what I've found is when I can switch me within the situation, I don't necessarily have to leave.
That's right.
Sometimes I do.
Yeah.
But sometimes I don't. Sometimes it's, well, okay, I just had to see this a little bit differently. Yeah. It's still a boring meeting.
Yes.
I mean, I'm not giving up on that.
Yeah.
But I can handle it differently.
Right.
You can handle it differently.
Yeah.
And there's also then the perspective taking too of like, okay, this meeting is one, however much of the pie,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I enjoy all these other things.
Right.
Right. And so, and then when you can pendulum about where you focus your attention.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, am I only thinking about the meeting when I'm in the meeting, or does my mind, whatever I'm doing and whatever piece of the pie, do I go back to, oh, that meeting's coming up?
That's
or,
right.
Oh, no, that meeting. So how much space does the meeting take up?
Yeah.
Yeah. And we can work to right size it.
Yeah,
even within
yeah.
our own being.
That's totally my experience.
Yeah.
Working to right size it is part of the good side of transitioning internally.
Yeah.
Working to right size it.
You had mentioned meditation as a way to do that. Are there other practices that you found that have helped with that as well?
Helped with like the moving back and forth between like perception or
That, or just expanding that circle that you were talking about, just with comfort and other things.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, again, I think that's a lot of why people go into therapy. Like, well, how do I have these hard conversations, like even with myself, right? And so having safe spaces just to talk out loud and to process. So I'd say processing with safe people is another another thing to do. I think even exercising, like getting outside, taking a walk. I know when I would have like heated things happen within certain jobs, if I could just get outside and walk, like it would recenter me and reground me, right? It would bring me back to this is manageable, right?
Yeah.
So in some ways, I think it's like paying attention to your needs. Like, am I hydrated? How did I sleep last night? I always found with board meetings that if I had not slept well the night before, there was a whole lot more chatter going on in my head, you know, or if I went in hungry, or if I went in already upset with someone. All of these things certainly affect the ways in which. So taking good care of yourself is one way just to expand the two. But again, I think exercise, when you know, we know from studies that there's all these good chemicals that come in and act like Pac-Man to eat the stress chemicals, and then you're just a little bit more free to be you. Yeah. So I think there's all kinds of things actually, though. Like certain readings help people feel grounded and can widen their stance. I think it can be a playful exercise to be curious about what does work for me.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Because
and it'll
different
help
things are for different people.
Yeah,
Sure.
Yeah.
different temperaments, different types of life, different stages of life.
Yes.
No doubt about it.
Right.
And all of that fits into what you're saying under the big umbrella of taking care of yourself. Because part of the whole transitional world has that piece in it as well.
Yeah.
Is this transition helping me to take care of who and what I am and who I feel like I need to be and where I need to head? Because oftentimes one of the great indicators that it's time for me to shift, once again, maybe internally or externally, is when I'm not taking care of myself.
Yeah.
And then my body's starting to break down.
Yes.
And then I'm starting to get sick.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And then if you don't stop that pattern and that continues to move on, then you end up in a pretty chronic situation.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it's almost like you can't wait. You have to get out.
Yeah.
You can't stay in the situation that you're in because it's just too, big word today, toxic. Or it's toxic for me, or it's toxic, for who I'm trying to be.
And we all have different thresholds of toxicity.
Yeah.
So that lots of different things in our life play into. And we can have compassion for all of it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a big thing about at any point in time in life when you're taking a look at, especially if you're trying to make a decision on should I shift from one thing to another, holding that compassionate heart for yourself and for life.
Well, and I think for the people that it affects too, right? Like, I mean, I have felt a lot of compassion towards all the people at the parish where I left. And because, like, they didn't ask for me to leave, you know?
Yeah.
And it was something that I had to do for me and my family. And but I have a lot of compassion. But I've learned a lot through compassion that you do have to start with yourself.
Yeah.
I think as Christians, we feel more comfortable having compassion for other people.
Right.
So it's actually a much easier place to start with having compassion for others. The real learning for me and so many people that I work with is having compassion for ourselves, you know, and then out of that organic place, really allowing God to nourish a compassion within us, then the compassion can organically flow out towards others in a way that I think can sometimes feel more palpable to people.
Well, why do you think people have a hard time with having compassion for themselves?
Well, I mean, the Dalai Lama would say, what are you talking about? Like, people were made to have compassion for yourselves. This is a Western problem.
Yeah, it's a totally Western problem.
It's a total Western problem.
Interesting.
And I have found the more reading I've done and the more people that I've talked to, I actually think it's something that the Christian church perpetuates.
That's preach it, sister.
Okay. So the problem becomes is the way we perceive self-compassion.
Yeah.
Right? We don't see it like the Dalai Lama sees it. We see it as selfish. We see it as, oh my gosh, I might become a narcissist if I'm compassionate towards myself. We experience it as it being quite problematic. Oh, it could lead me down this or this or this, or nobody would like me anymore, or, you know, because I'm so consumed with myself. That is not what true compassion is about at all. Compassion is about turning towards suffering. And so as Christians, and it's even in scripture, you know, we're taught to turn towards other people's suffering, but there's not like any teaching on how do we turn towards our own suffering. And so unfortunately, because we don't, and we're not taught to, in the Buddhist tradition, they talk about how if someone sends an arrow and it lands in you, right? Of course you're going to feel pain. But then all the ways we think about it and all the ways we conceptualize it and all the stories we start telling ourselves about the arrow is what creates suffering. Then all of a sudden there's numerous arrows, but we've done all of them except the original one.
Right.
And so how do we take the love, the compassion, the kindness of Christ and allow Christ to be with us? Okay, so I get really jazzed about this part. So Maundy Thursday is one of my favorite high feast days, okay? And it's because Jesus loves so deeply. I mean, he gets on his knees, for crying out loud. He takes the role of a servant. It totally freaks them out initially. And he touches them. He washes their feet. And the thing that I've come to is, because what is he going to do? He's going to get up and say, I give you a new mandate, according to the Gospel of John, that you love one another as I have loved you. You know, it's a spin on love your neighbor as yourself. We couldn't figure out how to love ourselves. We couldn't figure out how to love our neighbors because we didn't, as ourself, made no sense to us. And so Jesus said, okay, scratch that. You're not getting it. Let's do it this way. Love your neighbors as I have loved you. And so I think Christianity gives us this tremendous opportunity to go, oh, I need to receive the love in a way that actually transforms my heart. So that's the place that I love my neighbors from. You know, so we I feel like we just keep missing it.
Yeah, well, so it's a great example of trying to help some massive belief. A belief that in many ways took over Western Christianity, and that is self-care is selfish.
Right.
Or thinking of self is wrong. You should be always thinking of others. That would be, to me, what you're talking about would be a way to try to help slowly transition that belief. The idea that the greatest gift, or one of the greatest gifts God has given us, is our lives.
Yes.
And it's your life. And that life is important. And to not see myself that way, or to see myself that way, is not selfish.
No.
Or conceited, or whatever other things oftentimes get thrown onto anybody who tries to do some of the stuff that you're talking about. That's one of the great spiritual transitions I see the Western world needing in a bad way.
Can you name that, like in a nutshell, when you say the transition the Western world is needing is?
From the transition the Western world is needing is into seeing that self-care is not selfish.
Yes. And it's actually how we care for others.
That's right, yeah. To love self and love others is the same thing.
Yes.
Right. So somehow or another, to start with self, the easiest example that to use and has been used a million times is when a plane is going down and the masks fall out of the place where they come from. Put it on yourself first, then you can put it on somebody else. But our whole tradition oftentimes get put on, no, don't put it on yourself. That's selfish. Take care of that person first.
Then
you might be
that
dead
person.
Before then you can that person. You've passed out. But keep trying. So it's like, no. That's what I mean, the shift. The shift to seeing yourself the way that you talked about the Dalai Lama seeing us.
Well, I think it's how God sees us, right? Like we don't have to lose our tradition to be able to come home to its essence. There is something deeply true in the Christian faith. We pivoted somewhere along the way, and we took a really long rabbit hole into dangerous waters.
What waters do you see?
Well, I think that it can create a tremendous amount of dysfunction, right? Because oftentimes if we don't use some of our agency to care for ourselves, what starts flying in our blind spots is we're expecting everybody else to take care of us.
There you go,
And then that can become very passive-aggressive. And can create highly dysfunctional systems.
Highly resentful. When I'm doing that, when I'm expecting somebody to just read my mind and know my need. and then they don't do it, then I can get really resentful about, well, heck, I did it for you.
Yeah. So, and what I find myself curious about too is that it's not like an either or, right? Like it really is a flow. Like there's I'm caring for myself that flows out to other people. Then they feel enriched and they're caring for me. And there's just this really easy flow where the way I would articulate it is that the Holy Spirit then is flowing more freely within me to you and to you back to me and me within myself. And it's a very easy to get a bunch of blockages in here, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically. I mean, it's amazing, guys, how much gets lodged in our bodies because we don't process this stuff.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So.
There you go.
So it's all kind of goodness. And again, remembering, like, sometimes I don't even know if it's like chicken and egg. Like, is it starting with me or is it just being willing to start and hold both?
Yeah.
Right?
Sure,
and not in a way that it's tension, but in a way in which they're yoked.
Yeah.
So.
That it's not all one or the other. Gotcha.
I don't think it can be.
Yeah.
We're social creatures. You know, we need each other. And I think that was part of the divine design is that we do need each other. And so reciprocity in community is a really beautiful thing.
Yeah.
I think that's another place too where we run into a Western conflict with our individualism.
Yes.
You know, and just the promotion of doing it on your own, lifting yourself up, making your own way, which are all great things, but can come at the absence or the consequence of relationships with other people.
Yes.
Or we can see people as a way just for us to reach our goal versus something to be shared together.
Yeah.
So I think it just gets messy when the church, for whatever reason, adopts or kind of broadens some of those ideas and not ordains them, but kind of makes them a part of the movement.
Yeah.
When there's already a movement there that's trying to show us something bigger.
Gotcha.
But we have a hard time either trusting that or believing it. So we fall back on what we do trust and believe, which a lot of times is partial or shallow.
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of what we started about with, it's what we know.
Right.
Yeah.
So we know that. And that's why, you know, the once again, a way to see a big transition, a way to see a huge one within the spiritual, religious world, whatever you want to call it, is a reformation. The idea that, okay, we've done that, that's not working so well anymore. All right? So in this context, it's we've focused on the other for a long time now. And we focused for a long time on trying to take the speck out of the eye of the other, and we forgot all about the log in our own.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's okay to look at yourself and take the log out and see where that leads you. See how that helps you see. That's the way I hear what you're saying. That, you know, the idea that we can transition into something new doesn't mean that what went before was bad. It just means that it had its time.
Yes. Yes.
So.
Yeah. And there can be a natural, organic yoking process, right? So that it's not one or the other.
Right.
We have something to learn from both.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
So in thinking about transitions, obviously there's some transitions we choose or we're aware of, but then there are others that are forced upon us, whether it's a tragedy or the loss of someone or something we don't have control over. And then we find ourselves just in this sea of uncertainty and chaos. And in those kinds of situations, those kinds of transitions, what's the wisdom there? What would we share with someone who might be in that situation?
Yeah, that's a great question. That really is. And it's, you know, the different, being able to choose is usually way more, even though that's hard, it's less traumatic, I think, than being in a situation like that. So the first thing that I would start with, and Caroline, I want to please join in, is what we talked about before, is stay compassionate with yourself.
Yeah.
just recognize that the what you're feeling is what you're feeling, what you're going through is what you're going through, and all those things are worthy of your love, attention, and compassion. And so start with that. Mm-hmm. Start there. And what would you go from there?
Well, and I also want to kind of back up to say, to like help people think about, because sometimes if we're not going through something ourselves, it's hard to maybe to relate to what we're saying, but you probably know someone who at this very moment is going through something that they didn't ask for, a transition that felt forced on them. You know, working at UT Hospital for those 3 years, I saw this all the time. I mean, sometimes people would land in palliative care and 3 days prior, they didn't even know they were sick. Mm-hmm. And so then it's not only happening to the patient, but it's also happening to all their family of like, whoa. Of course, UT is a level 1 trauma center, so that we always had car accidents and boating accidents and motorcycle accidents coming into the trauma bay too. Talk about sudden and unexpected, and often life and death situations. And so those family members would just be in shock for quite a long time. But then I think there's also like what happens when you're in a relationship and one person wants to move on, to end the relationship, at least as it's known, and the other person doesn't, right? I mean, I think that can be just as jarring on some level for people as what we think of as the bigger traumas. And so I do think like being compassionate with yourself, and I also think like, it sounds funny being transparent with yourself, but it's amazing how much you can hide from yourself. Of this is hard. Like really owning this is hard. And I think the other thing for me that's been helpful, especially in the transitions where I didn't ask for it, I didn't necessarily even want it, and was leaning into good friendships. Friends trusted friends who I could say the truth, the hard truth out loud about me and whoever else was involved. And I knew they were going to still love me. And I knew that they would be compassionate towards everybody in the situation. I also think for me, I've had spiritual directors and therapists for myself have been really, really helpful guides for me, and mentors and colleagues. But again, I think the word I would say for me is trusted. Right? Like these aren't the places where you want to just go out and whoever is willing to listen to you start talking. No. As Brene Brown talks about, like you want somebody who's already got some marbles in the marble jar, or who's trained to have these kind of conversations and to hold this kind of sacred space with people.
That's the part as you were talking that I was going to add. You know, somebody, you could have a trusted friend, but then also have somebody who maybe has gone through the same thing. Or somebody who you just, you know, I have a spiritual director that I meet with weekly, so that would be a place that I would definitely take something like this.
Right.
And know that the person's trusted, and not only just trust me with his heart, but that has some marbles in the jar. Right. Knows something about what's going on in this kind of a situation. And once again, go back to for yourself, be kind.
Yes.
Be as kind and as patient and as compassionate as you can be with yourself in times like this. Yeah, I'd say that's true. I was just going to add too that, you know, just because somebody has marbles in the marble jar, so to speak, doesn't necessarily mean they're the right person to help navigate this transition. Right? Like my significant other, Andy, like he doesn't necessarily need to be the person to help me with all the things. And some things he may find too triggering, right, to be the person to process something through. So, you know, sometimes there's some discernment about who is. I have this dear friend who genuinely felt called to walk with me through the leaving church part. And it'll make me cry. I cannot tell you how profound that gift was to me and continues to be. And because she was able to be so articulate about feeling called to
kind of shepherd me through this. And we just walked and walked and literally just took walk after walk after walk every day. And she let me cry and cry and cry. And it was knowing that she felt called and she was able to articulate that to me helped me to not feel like I was burdening her. You know, because it was a lot of walks and it was a lot of tears and it was a lot of processing. So it was a truly divine gift.
That's great.
Yeah. I think maybe which helps us also realize that like we can be those vessels of light and hope for people when they're going through transitions, right? And so like I'd never thought about like in a friendship. I have walked as a friend with many friends through lots of life transitions, but I don't know if I've ever stopped to think that I felt called to do so. And so that's really started to be a spiritual discipline for me of, gosh, well, and then allowing that if it's a call, then letting myself be filled by the Spirit to meet those needs. I'm not having to generate it by myself.
Gotcha.
You know?
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of opportunities in how we journey with each other in life, and the transitions can oftentimes be hard.
Yeah. That's when we really need each other.
Yeah. I think it's oftentimes when community feels the most palpable, it feels the most needed, and I think it's usually what bonds people.
Yeah, no doubt. Thank you for listening to this episode of the More Than One Way podcast, brought to you by the Center for Spiritual Practice in Knoxville, Tennessee. We really appreciate your time and would love to hear your feedback. You can reach us by emailing hello@morethanonewaypod.com, or you can connect with us on social media using the handle @morethanonewaypod. If you found this episode helpful, we hope that you'll share it with your friends, with your family, with people you work with all the people who you know. Thank you and take care.